So I was asked to share my Revert story, my story of taking my shahadda. So I decided to go ahead and do it. I mean, why not? Hopefully it inspires somebody. Hopefully it encourages somebody out there to do the same and take the same journey, right? Even though we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who makes us Muslims, but at the same time, Allah can use us as a vessel to inspire others. And I hope that that's what this does. So I was 17 years old. I was arrested for a crime that I didn't commit. They didn't have any physical evidence to prove that I was a shooter in this case. In fact, they arrested me and told me specifically to testify against my cousin. I refused to do it. They wanted me to put the blame on my cousin because they wanted my cousin, and I refused to do it. So they pushed the charges against me. They pushed the case on me all the way. I was 17 years old. They tried me as an adult, which means they had to give me bail. I bailed out. I stayed out on bail for about 2 years. And right before trial, they considered me a flight risk. So I had to turn myself in. I went to trial. So I went to trial. It was a jury of my so-called peers. Everybody there was majority white in the jury. Pretty much all of them were old enough to be my parents, my grandparents. They found me guilty. No physical evidence. No one was able to get on a stand and say that they saw a gun in my hand or that they saw me actually shoot. They just said that I was there. All of that is a whole nother story, but it's important. I'm bringing it up for a reason. The reason I'm bringing it up is because all of that made me angry. Like, I got sentenced by the judge, and the judge even said it himself that he felt I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. But he told me that I was going to get life in prison. He gave me 45 years to life. Eventually, alhamdulillah, it got knocked down to 20 years by the grace of Allah, right? Subhanallah. Now, I went to prison. I was 19 years old. By the time I actually made it to the prison yard, I was 20 years old, right? I got there. I was young. I was the youngest one on the yard. So I started, doing what I felt I had to do to survive. In prison, in order to survive, you got to be violent. It doesn't matter. Like, you have to have a knife. You got to be willing to stab somebody. You got to be willing to kill if you want to survive. That's just how it is. Every time you left out your cell, with the mindset you might not make it back. I was on a maximum security prison, level 4, 180. If anybody knows about California prisons, like, I was at High Desert State Prison and it was bad. You feel me? So I did what I had to do. Thankfully, I was a very curious individual, right? I was very curious, and I started reading books. I started learning about black revolutionaries and things like that. But I was also around a bunch of older guys in the prison yard who pushed those types of things on me. Who even told me, man, go to education, get your GED, go to the law library, learn about law if you're going to appeal your case, learn what's going on. Don't just depend on a lawyer. And I did that. I took their advice. I did that. I read a lot of books. I gained a lot of knowledge. I learned a lot of things from different topics, different subjects. And my mind started expanding, right? So as time went on, I was still getting into trouble. I was still messing up in prison. I was still just like constantly just doing bullshit. I was drinking. I was smoking. I was hanging out as if I was still on the streets. That's how it was for me, right? Every time I turn around, though, it was something. It was drama. And I just remember finally, after 10 years of being in prison, I remember having one situation with a particular individual who was supposed to be my homie. I'm not going to go into particular details about that situation, but that situation called for me having to really get physical with this person and really having to go there. But when it all happened afterwards, I remember sitting in the cell and I remember laying there, right? And at the time, like I said, I was still, smoking, drinking. And I remember having some weed and I rolled the weed up afterwards and I sat there and I smoked and I just thought about it and I said, man, I'm tired of this. I'm really tired of going through this. Every time I turn around, it's the same thing. So I told myself, like, I need to find the answer. I really do. I really need to find the answer. I had already tried Buddhism. That didn't work. Christianity, okay, I grew up in a family that was supposed to be Christians. That for sure didn't work. It left me with more questions than anything. But Buddhism kind of gave me a sense of some peace, but it made me understand that I had to seek more knowledge. I had to dig deeper. And that's what I started to do. I started to dig deeper and I started to pay attention to my surroundings. And paying attention to my surroundings, I noticed something around me. And I noticed that I was friends with a lot of Muslims that were on the yard. And there was one Muslim in particular who had a very, very important role into me taking my shahada. And I'm going to talk about that in part 2.